Okay, it is 6:34, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. This is the North Capitol Street Corridor Study. This is our first public meeting. My name is Jamie Ernst. I'm a transportation planner with the District Department of Transportation. Before we get started, I'll have Peyton Manning from Tina Boyd and Associates go through some logistics for WebEx. Peyton?
Great, thank you, Jamie. And thank you again, everybody, for joining tonight's meeting. Again, my name is Peyton Manning. I'm the outreach coordinator on this project. So tonight, the team will start by doing a brief presentation. Everyone's mic except the presenters will be muted during the presentation to avoid any background noise. If you have any questions throughout the meeting, we ask you to leave them in the Q&A box. And if at any point throughout the meeting a question comes to mind, go ahead and send it in the Q&A, and we'll address them in the order in which they were received. I do want to point out that there's a closed caption. If you're on the computer, you can access this with the little CC icon on the bottom left of your screen. And on mobile, it'll be the three dots on the bottom right, and you'll see the closed caption option. Next slide, please. I think we skipped one, James. Okay. So again, if you do have any questions, we'll open up the chat for you to speak at the end of the meeting during the Q&A period. We ask you raise your hand with the icon on the bottom right of your screen. And again, if you're on the phone, it'll be within the three dot icon. And if you're calling in, you can press *3 at any point to raise your hand. And again, we'll address those in the order in which they're received. And then again, one more brief run through of the Q&A box. You should see the Q&A icon on the bottom right of your screen. That's where we ask you send any questions. And then again, if you're calling in, *3 is what you're going to want to use.
Thanks very much, Peyton. So this is the agenda for our meeting. The project team will give a brief introduction. Then I'll provide an overview of our study, talk about the community and agency engagement that we've done so far. Then I'll run through some safety issues on the corridor. Then we'll talk about some quick delivery projects at the top 10 high crash intersections. We'll then give a high level overview of the feasibility of a deck over. I'll then go through next steps for the project, and then we'll have the opportunity to hear your comments and questions. So I'd now like to introduce the project team. As I said, I'm Jamie Ernst. I'm a transportation planner at DDOT, and I am the project manager for the North Capitol Street Corridor Study. Ted, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Ted Van Houten. I'm the deputy project manager for this project.
Ed?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ed Stoloff, and I manage the project planning branch within the Planning and Sustainability Division. Thank you for being here tonight.
And now we'll go to our consulting team, Leverson.
This is Leverson Patel with KLS Engineering, leading a strong interdisciplinary team working with DDOT on this important project. Thank you. Mike.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Mike Gifford with RK&K, part of the KLS team, leading the feasibility for the deck over.
Colin wouldn't be able to join us tonight, but he's with FA&P and he's leading the urban planning area of this project. Nicole?
Hi, good evening. My name is Nicole White with Symetra Design, and we led the safety evaluation, or are leading the safety evaluation.
And then one more time, everybody, my name is Peyton Manning. Again, I'm from Tina Boyd and Associates. I'll be leading, along with Nora Moss, the communications and outreach of this project. You may have seen some of my team in the field over the last few weeks.
Nora, would you like to introduce yourself? Okay, well, we'll move on. So I'll now provide an overview of the study. So this study will occur in multiple phases. We're currently in phase 1, which will conclude in fall of this year. Phase 1 of the project includes the objectives you see on the screen. first of which is to evaluate the feasibility, impacts, and cost associated with decking over the underpass from T Street to Rhode Island Avenue. Where we've also conducted a safety evaluation of the corridor. And from that safety evaluation, we identified the top 10 highest crash intersection and developed short-term safety improvements at those intersections. A goal of this study is a high-level re-envisioning of the corridor by developing multimodal cross-section alternatives. Those cross-section alternatives will be presented at the second public workshop in the fall. And the last objective of this study is to conduct a safety evaluation of Lincoln Road Northeast and develop associated quick build safety interventions for Lincoln Road as well. This will also be presented at the public workshop in the fall. So here's the study areas for this project. It's an approximately a 4-mile long corridor starting at Massachusetts Avenue at the southern end and ending at Missouri Avenue, Riggs Road at the northern end. Phase 2 will expand to include a larger project area of influence, and this will be when we conduct traffic modeling and other impacts. The study area will expand to the image that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. The corridor has been subdivided into 7 segments due to its length and varying conditions along the corridor. The corridor segments vary in terms of population density, land use, vehicle speed, and infrastructure, so different treatments may be appropriate on different segments of the corridor. So North Capitol Street has been identified in the Build Back Better Infrastructure Task Report to Mayor Bowser. I know this is quite a long paragraph, but it captures the essence of what the goal of the project is and what the corridor could transform it into the future. So the aim is to transform North Capitol Street into an urban boulevard that is safer and more inviting for those on foot and bike by enhancing pedestrian crossings, bus lanes, and adding more landscaping and green space. So we'd like to transform North Capitol Street into an urban boulevard that's safer for all roadway users. So this is a really holistic vision for the entire corridor. As I said, the study is divided into 2 phases. Phase 2, which we anticipate beginning in the spring or summer of 2024, will consist of the following elements on the screen. So it'll build upon the multimodal concepts we're developing in this phase and expand upon those concepts by including potential deckovers at different locations along the corridor, looking at options to bring depressed sections of the corridor up to grade. We'll also be looking at modifying the interchange at Irving Street and creating a more urbanized alternative and reincorporating that into the street grid. We'll also include widening sidewalks, removing obstructions on sidewalks, and generally bringing sidewalks and dimensions up into compliance to DDOT standards. We'll also conduct a comprehensive traffic analysis of the corridor, a right-of-way study, initiate environmental documentation, and throughout that phase, we'll also have continued public engagement. The corridor has been studied in various ways over the last 10 to 15 years. This is just a sampling of some of the more recent studies. The one I wanted to highlight in particular is DC Office of Planning's North Capitol Cloverleaf Urbanization Study, and that looked at the Irving Street interchange and developing a more urbanized alternative, which the second phase of our study will build upon. I'll now talk about the community and agency engagement that we've done so far. So both phases of the study will include a community advisory committee that we've assembled. We'll also be meeting with the ANCs throughout the corridor. We'll conduct stakeholder meetings, interagency committee meetings, larger public meetings like the one we're having now. We also have a project website, which includes a resource section that will continually update throughout the project. So we do have a community advisory committee, and that consists of several civic associations along the corridor, the ANCs in the project area, the Bicycle Advisory Council, Pedestrian Advisory Council, the NOMA Business Improvement District, and North Capitol Main Street. So we've had 3 CAC meetings thus far. The last one was in November of last year where we conducted a site visit of the corridor. Our next meeting is planned for this summer following these two public meetings. I'll now go through some safety issues along the corridor. So North Capitol Street was identified as a high crash corridor in MOVE DC, which is the district's long range transportation plan. We've analyzed data over a 5-year period from 2017 to 2021. There were 6 fatal crashes along the corridor during that time period, which resulted in 7 fatalities, as 1 crash involved 2 fatalities. Those are shown to the map on the right side of the page. The majority of those crashes involved pedestrians, but the crash on Bryant Street did include vehicle occupants. And here you see a heat map of the crash distribution along the corridor. The red circles show the areas with a higher concentration of crashes. And on the right-hand side, you see the dashed red circle. This indicates that the majority of crashes occurred south of Rhode Island Avenue. And then 6 of our 8 high crash intersections are also located south of Rhode Island Avenue. 5% of the crashes that occurred in the 5-year period had disabling injuries. There were 76 pedestrian crashes. 80% of those resulted in injury. There were also 35 bicyclist crashes, and 63% of those resulted in injury. There are various transportation options along the corridor. North Capitol Street is identified as a bus priority corridor in MOVE DC. There's also a high concentration of pedestrians on the southern end of the corridor. There are no bicycle facilities explicitly on North Capitol Street, but there are a few on cross streets, including G Place Northeast, K Street, and R Street. And R Street is a connection to the Metropolitan Branch Trail. North Capitol Street has also been identified as a freight priority corridor in MOVE DC. So I'll now go through transportation issues that were identified by our Community Advisory Committee in the meetings that we've had so far. We'd also like to hear from you in this public meeting about transportation issues along the corridor that you've also identified. So as you know, North Capitol Street is a 6-lane roadway with very long segments. This results in a high rate of speed. There's a high rate of red light running. There's also a high demand for parking. As we identified, it is a high crash corridor with several high crash intersections. There's little connectivity to the surrounding bicycle network, and there's also poor east-west connectivity from one side to the other. So there are very little crossings. There are also numerous schools, parks, playgrounds, and recreation centers along the corridor, which also results in a high level of pedestrian activity and also a high presence of children, and the red light running and high rate of speed that presents a particular danger for those groups. Continued on the issues, many of the sidewalks along North Capitol Street are either too narrow or obstructed by light poles or tree boxes. Drivers often do not yield to pedestrians, and there are also long crossing distance at intersections. And this behavior is also mirrored on Lincoln Road Northeast, so we're also considering safety interventions on that corridor as well. And I'll now pass it over to Nicole to talk about some recommendations for safety interventions on the high crash intersections we've identified. Nicole?
Thank you, Jamie. Yes, our recommendations this evening are focused on a pretty comprehensive evaluation and review of traffic data, crash data, and also numerous field observations by our team. So again, Jamie shared the heat map with you a few slides ago, and here it is again, just showing those areas with the bright red circles where there are the highest levels of crash data that we have. And we use that as the basis for determining how we were going to focus in on our study of some of the specific locations. So you'll see the purple X at the bottom that aligns with some of the red locations. And that those are our 10 focus study intersections that we will talk about. Some of the locations that have the bright red circle do not include the purple X, and those intersections are currently being studied by a separate effort with DDOT under the Highway Safety Improvement Program. So you'll see the 10 locations that we have here, and I won't go through all 10 as part of my direct presentation. We do have all 10, and I can answer questions if you have questions, but we are focused tonight on the 3 highlighted in red, and I'll just walk you through 1 or 2 of the recommendations that we have at those 3 sites. Before we jump into the detailed recommendations, just at a high level, I'll let you know that these are recommendations that are focused on signage improvements, things that can be implemented rather quickly by DDOT, signage improvements, pavement marking improvements, and other general improvements like that. So we'll move on to recommendation location number 1 at Massachusetts Avenue. And I think this is a busy slide, and I don't expect you to digest all of the information, but just this is the level of detail that we've talked about as a team. And so I will just point out one of the key recommendations at this location. If you will look at insert 1 2B in the lower left corner, this recommendation, we wanted to, instead of having shared lanes for through and left and right turns, we wanted separate lanes. And so we have recommended eliminating a few parking spaces, about 5 parking spaces here, so that we can have an exclusive lane for left, through, and right movements. And we can go to the next intersection. Okay, so this intersection, we have 2 pages for the intersections along this segment of the corridor between Douglas and Girard. So what I want to specifically talk about is on the next slide, so we can just jump ahead to the next slide, please. Okay, so I will, this part of the corridor has no traffic signals in this segment. The closest signals are at Michigan Avenue and Channing Street. And so we've heard from the advisory committee that there's a lot of speeding in the area, and we have data for that. And so the recommendations are focused on really reducing the speed in the area. There is an existing automated speed enforcement camera, and we are recommending adding a new camera as shown in number 7, and also relocating a camera to really focus on reducing speeds. And I also want to point out recommendation number 8, which shows high visibility crosswalks to really enhance pedestrian safety there. And so the next and last intersection that I will focus on this evening is at Riggs Road. And again, we have 2 pages of recommendations here. The first page, I just wanted to point out a lot of, oh, sorry, we can go ahead to the next one. Did we eliminate Riggs Road? Oh, okay, sorry, thank you. I was on a different screen here, but the focus here is really on a lot of the pedestrian safety improvements and improvements to make pedestrian activity highly visible. And so we're looking to increase and widen the size of crosswalks at 2 of the locations at this intersection. And also you see a number of signs that we are proposing to install, like no turn on red. So that's really gonna enhance the environment for the pedestrian. And then if we go to the next page, again, the same intersection, sorry, go back, I'm sorry. The same location here. I'll point out number 9, which shows where these are existing bollards along the intersection. And we have recommended that the bollards be extended so that we can avoid illegal left turns here at this location. And that is a recommendation that has recently been implemented by DDOT. And so I will pass the baton on to Mike at this time to talk about the deck over feasibility.
Great, thank you, Nicole. Yeah, so the next item that we're going to cover is the deck over feasibility. So on the next page, we'll start off going over the location and kind of an overview of what we looked at this point in the study. So the location is going to be the area between the Key Street Bridge and the Rhode Island Avenue Bridge. In this area, North Capitol Street is depressed for 4 lanes which go through to avoid the intersections of Key Street and Rhode Island Avenue, creating a divide in the roadway as well as some open area above it that is currently not usable. So the goal of this would be to create a new pedestrian space between these bridges to connect both sides of North Capitol Street for better pedestrian activity, as well as a new space that could be used for community events and gatherings and other programming. So with the feasibility study, what we were really looking at was, can this be built? If so, what would be the cost and what would be the overall impacts of it? For this, we came up with 3 different alternatives of varying costs and coverage for the deck over, which we'll cover in just a little bit. So on the next slide, we show the existing conditions. So here on the left, we are looking north at Teeth Street Northwest, and on the right, we're looking at Rhode Island Avenue. So this would be the area that we'd be decking over, covering basically putting a structure over top of the underpass lanes between these 2 bridges to create this new space. So and then on the next slide, we can start looking at what we looked at with our different alternatives. So as I mentioned, we had 3 different alternatives that we looked at that varied in coverage amounts, as well as then the overall connectivity of them. And as a result of both of those, the overall costs as well. So the first one would just be largely expanding on the bridges that are out there. So around T Street, we would do an expansion of this bridge to provide more pedestrian connectivity, wider sidewalks, as well as some gathering spaces. And then the same thing, Rhode Island Avenue, but the Rhode Island Avenue would be a little longer, coming all the way down to Todd Place to provide pedestrian connectivity across there as well. There would be an opening in between these 2 structures, which of course then reduces the amount of overall deck over coverage that we have. However, this opening also does help reduce costs greatly because it changes, basically this turns into 2 consecutive tunnels down the street, and it changes the tunnel requirements as far as some of the features that would have to be built in to that tunnel system. Layout 2 in the center there expands on layout 1, provides the full length of deck over coverage, but still has an opening. We were looking at an oval opening on this to help make it be a little more interesting, as well as to continue to provide connectivity for pedestrians on the inside. This is actually similar to what's being done with the Connecticut Avenue deck over by DuPont Circle. And once again, the opening in there would be there to help change some of the requirements, as far as this would be once again considered 2 shorter tunnel systems adjacent to each other rather than 1 long tunnel. And then option 3 looks at what happens if we deck over the whole area, really creating this long open space that can be used for a number of uses to really get the full use and ability of what a deck over area here could provide. So on the next page, we go through into a little bit more of a comparison of these. This is a little bit more on the numbers side. So we range from layout 1, where we have 26,000 square feet of coverage area that this would provide for a cost of around 44 million. And then increasing up to layout 3, which would be 37 square feet of coverage and for about $82 million. On the next slide, we also looked into a number of the key constructability challenges. These included things like property access. There are a number of buildings, including that are largely residences, along the service drives in this area. And so making sure that there would be access to those during construction would be a challenge. These would be fully restored at the end of construction, of course, but still making sure that there's appropriate access along the service drives would be appropriate. And then the other aspects are largely considering the overall traffic operations and safeties for all users. So we have bike users, pedestrians. As Jamie mentioned, this is a transit priority corridor as well as a freight priority corridor. So making sure that all of those could be maintained in a safe way through construction. And then the last would be the connections and implementing of the mechanical systems that would be required for the tunnel systems. As I mentioned, as we get into the larger, longer tunnels, these requirements increase significantly. And so not only is it making sure that we have appropriate design and use of them for the tunnel, it also is the where can we provide a mechanical room? Where are some of these utility rooms and all going to actually be connected and accessed? So that's a high level look at what we've done so far with the Deckover study. The next step is that this is going to be advanced to concept design in the next phase, which will also start looking into some of the environmental documentation. On the environmental side, this will follow both the DDOT and federal standards for the environmental documentation that's needed, and generally we'll look into the overall impacts of the project on the environment, including community and historic impacts. So this will look at things like the fact that there's a T Street Historic District and coordination with SHPO that might be needed on that, the DC State Historic Preservation Office, and then impacts for the roadway closures and detours, as well as the final condition and temporary impacts on parking and vehicle operations and other elements such as those. And now I'll hand it back to Jamie.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mike. Yes, as he mentioned, this phase, it's a very high level overview of the Deckover concepts. Phase 2 of the project will explore those concepts in more detail. We also have a full Deckover technical memo, which is available on the project website. In the resources section, I will also say that the numbers that were shown, the finances that were shown in the slide, in 2 slides ago, those are 2022 numbers, and those are also reflected in the memo. We will be updating the memo to reflect 2023 cost. And so when we do that, I will also place that on the website as the final version. So I'll now go through next steps for the project. This is what will be presented at our public meetings. This is now public meeting number 1, where we went through existing conditions. I will also say that we have a full existing conditions report. If you'd like more information, that's also on the project website in the resources section. So we'll be also identifying current issues. We went over quick delivery safety projects for the 10 high crash intersections. And we also went through a high level feasibility evaluation of the Deckover. We'll have a second public meeting in the fall of this year, and that will explore high level multimodal concepts for the corridor as a whole. We'll look at the 7 segments that we divided the corridor into that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, and explore high level concepts for those. We'll also take a look at quick delivery safety improvements for Lincoln Road Northeast. So here's a high level overview of our study. Phase 1 will have public meeting number 1 in June. We're now in the virtual meeting. We'll hold an in-person meeting on this Saturday. I have more information about that in subsequent slides that'll present similar information, but we'll have a better opportunity to engage with you individually. We also will complete our safety evaluations of the top 10 intersections and finalize those recommendations this summer. We're working to develop those multimodal cross sections this fall and present those at the public meeting. And then we'll hold the second public meeting in the fall of this year. And that will conclude phase 1. Phase 2, we're working to continue that high level vision for the corridor by developing more detailed concepts and developing environmental documentation and conducting a traffic study. We'll also have continued community engagement. We're anticipating starting this phase of the study in the spring or summer of next year. So we'll now have an opportunity to take your questions and comments. We'll work through the chat, as well as Peyton will call on you if you have your hand raised. Before we get to that, I would just like to highlight our Title VI survey. We received federal funding, and because of that, it's important that we're in compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is really a great way for us to get your feedback on the project and a formalized way for us to document it. There are a couple ways for you to access this form. There's the QR code on the right-hand side of the page. There's also the link to the slide in the title. We also, so I'll leave it on this slide for just a moment if you'd like to take a picture of the QR code. Additionally, once you close out of this WebEx meeting, you'll be prompted to continue to the Title VI form. So again, we'd really love to hear from you in that way, and it's a way for us to really formally document your comments. So as I said, Peyton will call on you and we'll read through your questions from the chat, but these are also some potential discussion questions on items we'd like to hear from you on, including the most important transportation issues that we should be considering in the North Capitol Street Corridor study. If you have an overall holistic vision for the corridor, what would that be? And then of course, we'd like to hear any other questions or comments related to the corridor. So with that, I'll hand it over to Peyton and we can start going through your comments.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. So again, everybody, if you could raise your hand, we can unmute you, but first we're going to go through a few of these questions that are popping up in the Q&A period. And if you do have any responses to these discussion prompts, feel free to send them in the chat. That would be a great place for us to grab them and we can address them as we review. I do see a few hands being raised, but first I'll go through these first couple questions in the Q&A section. The first one being more of a comment, just to specify, there are bicycle docks at First and Rhode Island Avenue. I appreciate that. And then Jamie, we have a hello, thank you for presenting today. We live in Bloomingdale off of North Capitol, and cars have been particularly poorly behaved in the last couple of years. We're wondering what consideration has been given to the possibility of transit lanes on North Capitol and or Rhode Island Avenue. Bus service can be erratic and slow as buses bunch up.
So I believe that we have a representative from our transit delivery division on the call. And he will be able to address that question. Yes, so let me promote him to a panelist. Or Peyton, would you be able to do that? His name is Zach.
Let's see.
He's the very last person on the attendee list.
I have two. Which Zach are you? Or did you do it?
Oh yeah,
Done.
I've been unmuted. I'm here now.
Okay, thanks, Zach. Could
can
you
you
answer
repeat
that
the
question for us?
Yeah, can you repeat the question for me really quick? I'm sorry.
Sure. So they're wondering what consideration has been given to the possibility of transit lanes on North Capitol and or Rhode Island Avenue.
Okay, yeah. So North Capitol is on our bus priority network. And so as kind of Jamie and the team who presented to you today move through the project, we will take a look at North Capitol Street with our bus priority toolbox, which has a series of tools that include things like bus lanes, but not necessarily has to be bus lanes as part of the project. So it will be considered as part of the project. In terms of Rhode Island, I'm actually blanking at the moment if that is on our priority network or not. It may be on our future network where we anticipate improvements in the future, but I'd have to follow up with you on that one.
Okay, great. And Jesse, if you would like to leave your email or something in the chat, we can certainly reach back out to you with more information. And I see Ed's been answering some of these, but I'll just read through them and read through the answer just so everybody can hear. Is your study looking into decking over the underpass on New York Avenue and North Capitol as well? And Ed, thank you for answering. Phase 2 of the study will look at that. And then is your study looking into alternating directional rush hour lane traffic from North Capitol Street? That is a new question. I'm sorry, I thought there was an answer to that one. Jamie, if you could answer that.
Could you repeat that for me, please?
So is your study looking into an alternating directional rush hour lane traffic on North Capitol Street?
Not at this phase of the study. No, we are not. That is something we could consider in phase two. Ed, would you like to expand on that at all?
Yeah, sure. As Jamie said, we will be looking at a whole array of concepts, including directionality, bus lanes. It's just going to be basically a major effort to look at all possibilities, and then we'll narrow those possibilities down. And that will occur during the phase two. You're going to hear that a lot tonight, occurring in phase two. But that's where we really get into the details of the concept design. So if you have some suggestions, we want to hear your suggestions for inclusion in that second phase of the study. Thank you.
And this one's a bit of a question, Jamie, but I think more of a comment. This individual lives at the corner of North Capitol and Rhode Island Avenue. There's frequent crashes there, and cars frequently turn the wrong way to cut through U Street Northwest. And I'm surprised that this intersection isn't on the list of highest crashes, and hope that it's included in further safety evaluations. I'm sorry.
Understood. Yeah, we'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Next question, will DDOT consider a road diet on Massachusetts Avenue Northwest/Northeast so that a crossing with North Cap is safer?
We're not looking at Massachusetts Avenue in this study in particular, but it's something that we'll consider and I will make a note of to bring up to the rest of the team.
Okay, great. And here I just want to pause and let some of the individuals who've had their hands raised speak. So I know Coates, I know you've had your hand raised for a while, so I'll go ahead and unmute you if you're ready.
Questioning.
We should be able to hear you now.
Okay. I'm just questioning how these plans are going to tie in with the renovation of the reservoir space. How is that all going to come together? And another part is, has anybody thought about a circulator bus for the North Capitol Rhode Island corridor?
So your first question about the McMillan development, we do have their plans for their transportation design. And so we have worked to incorporate that, especially with the recommendations from Gerard to Douglas. And
Okay.
we have been working with the developers and keeping abreast of their plans. As far as the circulator question, I will let Zach answer that if you could. If you're still unmuted. I don't know if I need to do that or you do, Peyton. Peyton, I think you are muted actually.
I am, sorry. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
going to go ahead and unmute Zach again. So Zach, if you're ready to answer.
Yeah, hey. So in terms of new circulator service, I think that's a good question. And I think, it's something that we can look at as part of the study or, like if that's feasible. I don't know off the top of my head what the circulator team maybe has as like a future network in mind. But I do also kind of want to acknowledge that like with the latest round of budget that the city went through, it was a little tough and the circulator, some of the routes are seeing some modifications. So just want to keep that in mind too, be kind of like realistic about possibilities. But if there's a need, then we definitely want to document that as part of this process.
Okay, if you could kind of keep that at the forefront.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coates. I'm going to go ahead and lower your hand. If you have any more comments, feel free to raise it again. I'll do one more verbal for Adam Taylor. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you're ready to speak. We should be able to hear you now.
I live on Hanover Place. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can
Okay,
hear
thank you. I live on Hanover Place, just off the intersection of North Capitol and New York Avenue. And it's an old phenomenon, but it's gotten a lot worse since the pandemic, really. And it's cut through traffic. Commuters use First Street Northwest and the north-south alleys between First and North Capitol to bypass the the cluster that is the intersection of North Capitol and New York Avenue. They're trying to rush to get to 395, right? And they do not care about our neighborhood. And they run red lights, they block the box, they, you know, yell at my kids crossing the street. It's a really pernicious problem, especially south of Florida Avenue on First Street Northwest and through the alleys. And I'm just want to make sure that you guys are cognizant of that and are considering that, you know, whether there are changes that need to be made to First Street or the cross streets to prevent that. I don't know the answer. I have thoughts that I'd be happy to share with you in another venue, but I wanted to make sure that you guys were thinking about that and ask if that has pinged on your radar yet.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we do have our contact information in a couple more slides. So if you would like to email those questions, those further comments to us or to Peyton, and he can make sure that we get them, we would appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor. Again, I'm going to go ahead and mute you again if you have no more comments right now. And feel free to raise your hand again. And then we'll do one more verbal. I see Commissioner Imtiaz. I know your hand's been raised for quite some time. Oh, it went away. Okay. Laura Krantz. Oh, Commissioner Imtiaz, you're back. Okay, so I'll go ahead and unmute you. We should be able to hear you now.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I was lowering my hand so that you could take me in the queue. Thank you so much for this study. It's really crucial. And I know a lot of residents in our neighborhood are very concerned about the safety issues, specifically on Rhode Island Avenue and North Capitol Street. And having read through the documents, again, I would just like to reiterate our concern that this isn't in the first part of the survey. But the second part of my question is, given the number of surveys that have already happened, as was illustrated in the beginning of the presentation, are there any quick fixes that can be implemented really quickly on other parts of the corridor that don't require months and months? Because again, as your presentation has illustrated, we have had fatal crashes, pedestrian crashes, cyclist crashes, and it is an unsafe transit corridor. And so what we're really looking at DDOT for is solutions that can be implemented tomorrow and not another 5 years down the road. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for that comment.
Jamie, let me answer for you. Thanks.
Sure.
The 10 intersections that was presented earlier in the presentation, those are what we call quick delivery items, and those can be done in a matter of months. So that is not years. If you have specific locations other than the 10 that we have in the presentation, put that in the chat or put that in the Q&A and or email us, and we'll make sure that we consider those. But the 10 that we are showing here are quick delivery projects, so that's not years.
Great. Thank you, Ed, for that clarification. Laura, Mitch, and PDK, I acknowledge your hands are raised. I do want to just answer a few more questions from the Q&A, and then I'll come right back to the verbal communication. Back to the Q&A, I have a question. Will DDOT be adding RRFBs or HAWKSs so that motorists yield between Douglas and Girard? And Jamie, I believe is it a rectangular flashing beacon or a high intensity crosswalk? Is that?
Yes, that's correct. Nicole,
just wanted to clarify for everybody.
Nicole, could you answer that, or I can go back to that particular intersection in the slide deck?
Yes, could we please go back to that location in the slide deck, which is probably in the around number 26 or so, 26 or 27.
Yeah, here we are.
And so we and this goes to the question that someone asked earlier about what's happening at McMillan, and we know that there are plans for traffic signal to be installed at this location. And so we have talked about if there are these interim measures until the traffic signal is installed. But what we've looked at this point are the automated cameras to help to reduce speed, and some of the enhancements to improve pedestrian connections at Douglas Street in particular. I'll note this and we can certainly go back and talk about the Hawk. And I think that also depends on the timing of when some of the McMillan improvements will come online.
Jamie, let me just chime in there a little bit. Are you hearing me?
We can hear you.
Leverson, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the Macmillan plans call for 2 signals at Gerard, just south of Gerard, and at Eka. And the team is looking at that, and depending on this implementation schedule of the Macmillan site, there would be a second stage to these short-term improvements that are shown here, which, as Ed mentioned, is more paint and signage and other things, except with respect to the automated speed enforcement camera, to look at shifting the one southbound a little bit to be more in line with where they're speeding, as well as implementing the one northbound. So we are looking at that, and there may be a phase 2 of these short-term improvements pending the implementation schedule of the Macmillan site. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Leverson. And then the next question would be, will DDOT commit to a full left turn hardening elements? You show them as a pavement reflector only. And I'm not sure at what specific location.
Could you clarify that?
Yeah. Gordon, if you're able to clarify what specific location you were referring to. Oh, Gordon, I see you raise your hand. I'll go ahead and unmute you so you can clarify. We should be able to hear you now.
Thank you. Yeah, at the intersection treatments you're showing, I didn't see actual like left turn hardening. It's on the center lines. It seemed to just show reflectors. Will you add true left turn hardening, or what are those turn movement protections?
Leverson or Nicole, could you expand upon why we didn't make that recommendation?
Are you asking about a median perhaps as something? I'm trying to be clear on what you mean by the left turn hardening.
Yeah, like at the intersection with Riggs, you have the center lines between the two directional
I see.
traffic
I
lanes.
see. I do know that would likely take more space, and I don't know if that is available in terms of the width of the roadway. That was an existing, the bollards were there, the flexible posts were already there, and it was just a matter of extending them. That was sort of the immediate delivery item that DDOT was able to do. I can add the concrete hardening to the list of something for us to discuss internally.
And just
go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just to add to what Nicholas said, one of the things we're in discussions right now is whether we can accommodate left-turn hardening at some of those left-turn locations. Pending, we can reduce the lanes a little bit to get sufficient space in the middle to install the left-turn hardening treatments. So that's going to be a further discussion that could be finalized in the summer of 23.
Understood. And the one additional note is that if you guys do install those things, if you guys could shorten the amount of time it takes to replace them when they're destroyed, that would be appreciated. On North Cap, just south of there have been hardening elements that have been destroyed for 2 years or so.
And that's why one of the things we are looking at is can we accommodate a little more space in the roadway? Because if you just put them on the center line, which means you have like 2 inches on either side, then it gets destroyed almost immediately as you put it up. And then it takes a while to restore it. So we need to be able to get a little more space, maybe about 2.5 feet, so that you have at least a 1 foot offset on either side of the left-hand hardening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. I'll go back. I'll do one more verbal. Laura, if you're ready to speak, I can go ahead and unmute you. We should be able to hear you now.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for having this. We live in Stronghold, so right near the intersection of North Capitol and Michigan. And there's definitely a lot of danger crossing at Gerard because there's not a light. But I just wanted to also make sure that you're looking at actually the Michigan intersection with North Capitol, because my husband is a nurse and he works at Children's, for example, and I know he and a lot of other healthcare workers park in our neighborhood, which is on the northeast side of North Capitol. So they often cross at that intersection of Michigan and North Capitol, and it's so dangerous. Like the cars don't stop when they're turning right. They don't obey the red light when they're going straight. And so just because they are often crossing at odd hours of the day and night because of when the shifts at those hospitals start and stop, I know that that's been a really big issue in our neighborhood, is just like the healthcare workers at North Capitol. So if as you're looking at Girard, like one person was recently very badly injured at the intersection of Girard and North Capitol. So I know that's made people in our neighborhood even more nervous lately. And that was a person who another issue at this intersection is that buses drop off on the opposite side of North Capitol. So to get into our neighborhood, we have to cross at that either at Girard or at Michigan. And it's just very scary and dangerous.
I appreciate the comment. Thank you so much. Definitely something that the team will take a look at. And again, I'll go ahead and mute you again, Laura, if you have nothing else, and then feel free to raise your hand. The next question in the chat is, I would like to see the proposed short-term improvements between Randolph and P Street.
We do not, oh, yeah, I'm unmuted. We don't have them in this slide deck specifically, but they will be placed on the project website. And if you do give us your email, I can also email those to you directly. And I will also say at our in-person meeting, which I'll provide the details to, we'll go through all 10 intersection improvements and have an opportunity to get individual interaction with you. But I can certainly email those to you and they'll be on the project website.
Great, and I'm happy you mentioned that, Jamie. I'm actually putting in the chat right now. My email is there. If anybody wants to send me an email, feel free and we can follow up with you. And then also, I'm happy Jamie mentioned it. We will be in person Saturday morning at 43 K Street Northwest in the community room of Severna on K. But we'll share those details again once we're done with the Q&A period. The next question, which was answered, but again, I would like to share it. What are the transit ops differences between deck over and leveling / boulevardizing? Does bus throughput change? A comprehensive evaluation of transit operations under various concepts will occur during phase 2 of the study. And then does your study assess the feasibility of the community boulevard proposal as well? Or is it solely focused on the deck over proposal? And then Ed responded, the study will definitely consider the community boulevard alternative. Next question that has not been answered yet, Jamie. So the opening in the deck over 2 is ornamental. The DuPont opening is for venting. And that may be more of a question.
Yeah, Mike, could you answer that, please?
Absolutely. So the opening for this one also would be for venting as well as other mechanical needs. Basically, if you look at layouts 2 and 3 from what we set up here, there's a difference in 4,000 square feet of deck over space, which really is just the opening. That's really the only difference between them. But the cost of that changes by over $22 million. So that 4,000 square feet is causing us to up the other requirements for the rest of the deck over, which is why it was one of the things that we looked at with this.
Great, thank you. And then while you're here, Mike, the next question is, when you say deck over, what is going on the deck over? Will it be car lanes, pedestrian lanes, bus and bike lanes?
So, and Jamie, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is that it's going to be more of a plaza area. So it would not be bike lanes, bus lanes, vehicular lanes at all, that it actually is more of a gathering space, a kind of a plaza where there could be some greening elements, some opportunities for community programming to really give a space for the community to gather, as well as to then connect the two sides of North Capitol Street back together.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Mike, this is Ed. I see another question that you might be able to answer while you're on. And the question is there a possibility to increase the length or the amount of tunneling, lower level throughway to both serve traffic and pedestrians better?
So I guess my take on this question is that it's asking if there is a way that we can kind of deck over more of an area and have a longer tunnel. Which, I mean, the answer to that is yes, but it also always, there is a cost in comparison. Part of what we did with looking at the limits for the deck over here was that it's based off of where the current roadway is depressed. So it wouldn't actually have major changes to the travel lanes that are going underneath for the vehicular underpass. The limits that we were looking at, and I've seen a couple questions in the Q&A too on the limits, so I'll address that now too. The limits that we were looking at, the depressed roadway starts at Randolph, or right by Randolph, kind of at S Street, and then goes up to V Street. So in the areas though, right at each of those ends, the roadway ramps down, and until we actually have enough clearance height to put a deck over structure over it, we can't actually provide a deck over. We have to make sure that there is the required height for travel lanes. So that is kind of where our limits are set. And as I said, also addressing the other question that came up on the limits, we have expanded our deck over limits as we're showing them to the points where that clearance is met. So it does go south of the T Street Bridge towards S Street, and then north of the Rhode Island Avenue Bridge towards V Street, to the approximate limits of how far we can go while meeting the clearance height requirements.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that. And then one more question, and I'll get back to the verbal. Can you fund this study with a Reconnecting Communities Planning grant?
Ed, are you able to answer that?
We believe this project was considered, and the one reconnecting grant was 290, I believe the 295 project. But we'll look at this in future years as we get more detailed into concept design and engineering. And we're really looking at a very high level now. And as we look at some of the engineering alternatives, we'll look at that in perhaps in subsequent years.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. And now Mitch and PDK, I know you guys have certainly been waiting for a while. So Mitch, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you're ready, we should be able to hear you now.
Thank you. I live on W Street Northwest, just off North Capitol. And thank you to the city and Department of Transportation for soliciting feedback of the community members. Your presentation was great. Thank you, Jamie, Nicole, and Mike. And thank you, Peyton, for the moderation of these questions. I drive a moped and I bike. I often find myself caught between having to decide if I want to get somewhere a bit slower and safer by using First Street Northwest and with lower blood pressure, or get somewhere faster and face the stresses and dangers of using North Capitol. The current design of North Capitol seems to send a message to drivers that says this road is good for speeding. Without a significant overhaul, it seems like nothing will change North Capitol in like the transportation way. Sidewalks are inaccessible to people with mobility issues. Drivers are going to continue to speed, and then traffic continues to accumulate along major outlets. I just hope that whatever work is done, North Capitol is slowed down to give other roads in DC better opportunity to absorb North Capitol's throughput, and to make it easier for pedestrians to cross and for bicycles to use. The deck over idea as a potential solution for addressing the challenges of North Capitol, in my opinion, seems to fall short. North Capitol should be fundamentally reimagined. It doesn't need a Pleasant Park placed atop a dangerous underpass. And then just to include a question here, what work has been done in these studies to look into making North Capitol more accessible to wheelchair users or people with mobility issues?
We have recognized that the sidewalks are substandard in many locations and are blocked by tree boxes or light poles. And that is something that we're working to address. And I will say, in terms of your comment on the deck over not being the only solution, that's certainly not the only thing that we're looking at. That is what we presented in this presentation, but in the fall, we'll be presenting multimodal concept alternatives, which re-envision the entire corridor. So a deck over is just one solution at this one location, but we are looking at the corridor holistically as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Mitch. PDK, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. I know you've been waiting for quite some time now as well. We should be able to hear you now. PDK, you're unmuted if you wanted to speak. Okay, I'm getting no feedback. I'm going to mute you again and lower your hand. If you do want to come back, feel free to raise your hand again and we'll try again. Nick, I can go ahead and unmute you. If you're ready to speak, we should be able to hear you now.
Question is on the short-term fixes. Are all of the unfinished recommendations from the North Capitol Needs Assessment included in the short-term fixes? And if not, why? And can we get them added?
I've reviewed the needs assessment. They aren't all included. The project team can review those again and see which ones we can incorporate.
Could we get a list of the ones that didn't get incorporated?
I will look into that, yes.
Thank you so much, Nick. Okay, so back to the Q&A box. The next question is, can you include sidewalk widening and other curbside safety upgrades with a deck over? Trees have destroyed the sidewalk ability near the deck over area. And I do think, Jamie, you just touched on something similar, but if you could answer that directly.
Could you repeat that? It's just about, I'm sorry, I was writing down.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. So it's sidewalk widening and other curbside safety upgrades with a deck over, near the deck over. Like you had mentioned before, there are trees in the area that have destroyed the sidewalk passability near the deck over.
I mean, so one aspect of the project is bringing all the sidewalks up to DDOT standards, and that applies to around the deck over as well. That area wouldn't be excluded in any way.
Great, thank you. The next one we have is please include the full closure of the Lincoln Road access / slip lane from North Cap in this study of alternatives. I guess this is more of a comment. In the study of alternatives, Gordon will take note of that. Full study of opposite grade. It's a comment. We will take note of that. Kirby, I see your comment. So ANC 5E was not listed as part of the Community Advisory Committee, and it used to be included. ANC 5F is listed. We've certainly reached out to ANC 5E as a part of this project, and we'll be sure to keep them in open communication as when we bring back the Community Advisory Committee.
Yeah, I will say there were a lot of changes during the last election and redistricting, so a lot of the ANC commissioners that were representatives have changed. So following this meeting, we're kind of officially reconstituting the the Community Advisory Committee and getting renewed ANC nominations.
Perfect.
So I'll be reaching out to you for that.
Perfect. Okay, there are no traffic lights between Bryant and Randolph, and drivers constantly speed between the two. Will you consider a speed camera and speed sign on the southbound side? We are afraid the deck over will be a Band-Aid that doesn't address the primary safety concerns facing North Cap residents daily: narrow sidewalks and dangerous drivers.
I do want to emphasize again, we're not committing to a deck over one way or the other. One aspect of the study, and the next phase is looking into the feasibility and potential concepts. But at this phase of the project, we haven't committed to any concept or design or one way or the other. But your comment about the speed camera is noted, and I will write that down.
And Jamie, if I can chime in, I do think Bryant is one of the intersections being studied as part of the Highway Safety Improvement Program. So there could be some coordination there.
Yes, I think you're correct. Thank you.
And I see PDK is back. So PDK, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you're able to speak, we should hear you now.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We can.
Oh,
Yes.
great. So prior you couldn't hear me, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much for this opportunity and for sharing this information with us. I'm very grateful for the initiatives and the studies that have been done, and I have a specific concern regarding the area on North Capitol between P Street, which I understand is, one intersection of high concern, and New York Avenue. The property owners, small businesses, and residents who occupy the west side of North Capitol, from P to North Capitol, as you've heard in earlier comments, face some unique challenges with people trying to, through speeding and using the alleys and using First Street. We enjoy a very broad sidewalk in the 1400 block, and we also have parking along the west side, which is essential. This block has been struggling for decades to reinvigorate, to reestablish a community serving corridor here. And we hope that we can retain the broad sidewalk and the parking for customers, residences, and deliveries along here. However, as you may know from your studies, the attempts to reach New York Avenue cause severe backups from New York to P Street and beyond, and which result in a lot of idling. We have a large population of needy indigent people on the street who then often resort to aggressive panhandling in the street on North Capitol, which has resulted in some very difficult situations. And I just wanted to be sure you're aware of the dynamics down at this end, and the group of citizens and business owners and property owners would, happily work with you to let you know about the problems faced and the visions that we're working on, just to revitalize the commercial corridor here. So to calm the high speeds going under the tunnel and to also relieve the backups and the idling, I wonder if this is on your radar and if you will be incorporating these concerns into your considerations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, we're happy to work with you and hear in more detail about your specific concerns. I can actually go to the next page and so you can see our contact information. And so please reach out to me and Ted and Ed, and we're happy to set something up with you.
Great, thank you so much.
You. The next question we have in the chat is, can you provide more information on the short-term safety proposals for the other North Cap intersections?
Yes, and as I mentioned, those will all be on the website. And Nicole, I don't know if you have any more detail you can just offhand.
Well,
provide.
I don't know if you want to go through them or if we can just post them on the website since there's so many locations. We'll leave that up to you to decide how to proceed.
And just to let everyone know that we'll have a board for all 10 on Saturday morning. At the in-person meeting, we'll have a board for all 10 intersections that we're currently looking at. So we hope you'll attend the Saturday in-person meeting and we can discuss, all 10 with you on Saturday.
Thank you.
Next question is, thank you for the presentation. I'm concerned with the mismatch between the holistic vision and large geographic scale of the study area versus the narrow focus of feasibility for the Deckover project. How do we ensure the full range of solutions are being considered?
But I think I sort of answered this question previously. So one aspect of the study that will be presented at the second public meeting in the fall is the larger holistic vision, some high-level multimodal cross-section alternatives for each of the 7 segments of the corridor. And additionally, so we haven't committed to a Deckover or not, we're just exploring all possible options at this point. And one aspect of this study is looking at the feasibility and constructability of the deck over, but we haven't committed to one potential solution or another. And we are still looking at the corridor holistically, and that'll be explored more in the second phase as well. Ed, would you like to add on to that at all?
Yeah, let me just add a little bit. We will look at all alternatives, the community boulevard, bringing the corridor up to grade for the length of the corridor. We'll be looking at how to increase the dimensions of the sidewalks, and definitely tree canopy was mentioned here as well. Looking at the impacts and trade-offs of all of the alternatives. And it may be that, as Jamie said, we're going to have certain recommendations for one section and other recommendations for other sections. But definitely all the alternatives will be arrayed, the sub-alternatives, and we'll definitely look at the environmental trade-offs in terms of any historic issues, ADA compliance that we need, traffic issues, noise, and other environmental elements. So I want you to feel confident that once we get into a lot of the details of the concepts, that we'll dissect them and really look at all the environmental requirements for those.
Right. Yeah, I want to emphasize that nothing has been eliminated at this point. We're still considering all possible options.
Great. Thank you guys for that clarification. And the next question is it known whether the tunnel sections actually boost the overall capacity of North Capitol Street?
Mike, that's potentially a question for you.
Yep. So the tunnel sections actually wouldn't boost the capacity at all. There would be the same number of travel lanes going through there. So it would actually have similar capacity to what the existing condition is today.
Thank you. Answered verbally. Okay, the next question is, first, I'd like to voice full support for this project, rethinking major corridors like North Capitol with an eye towards the need of all users, not just cars, strikes me as a huge improvement. Second, we live at Hamilton and North Capitol, just a block from the Riggs Road intersection you highlighted. Hamilton also feels unsafe, but Riggs layout presents special challenges. I'm trying to track it and see if there is a question. The Riggs crossroads are very awkwardly placed, and I think the one cause of crashes might be people misunderstanding where they should drive. I think lines for drivers, simply driving from Riggs to Missouri in addition to turn lanes could help a lot. Okay. Conrad, thank you for that comment. Let me go back up. Okay, and the next question is Lincoln Road part of this overall study area? Also, although very costly and construction impact heavy, can an entire roadway/highway section underground from New York Avenue to Michigan Avenue be looked at?
The first question, Lincoln Road is a subsection of this study where we'll be looking at short-term safety improvements as we were at the intersections. So those recommendations will be presented at the second public meeting in the fall. And the second part of the question was looking at the intersection at Michigan for the interchange. Is that what it was?
It was, can an underground roadway or highway be looked at from New York Avenue to Michigan Avenue?
That's not something we're looking at in this phase of the study. Potentially the second phase. Ed, would you like to add anything?
I mean, nothing. I'm gonna say nothing is out of nothing is set in stone at this point. I know you've heard that throughout the night, but we'll be looking at concepts that are implementable and something that is realistic. So we'll do a first level cut of alternatives and look at if there are any fatal flaws in some of these alternatives from a technical standpoint, and then we'll refine the alternatives. So there'll be several levels of refinements as we go through the study and the alternatives. I hope that answers your question.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. And Jim, I see your comment, and I will definitely take note of that regarding the safety of North Cap heading north by Riggs and Missouri. I do want to go back to the verbal. So, Rachel, I know you have your hand raised for quite some time. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and we should be able to hear you now.
North Capitol. I mean, I live on Quincy Place near North Capitol, and I use that intersection nearly daily, mainly as a pedestrian, and it's a nightmare to cross, very dangerous. Cars are not following the traffic light signals, and I experience a lot of verbal abuse from drivers as well. The design of the intersection seems to encourage just bad driver behavior. Everyone's in a bad mood. So I just want to echo the call for a total rethinking of the corridor with an emphasis on safety and activating pedestrian space, and also activating the sidewalks, which are unusable in many areas, as has been mentioned. I did want to ask a question about the Deckover specifically, since that's what most of the presentation was about today. It seems like the main benefit of the Deckover proposal is a new public space. Is this meeting a need for public space that's been identified by any planning agency or DPR? There are two parks very close by to this proposed area, Crispus Attucks Park and then Harry Thomas, which is in need of a lot of investment. So I just question the proposal to invest significantly in a new public space when there are areas nearby that that need the funding. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, yeah, certainly creating more public space is one of the benefits of the Deckover, but an additional benefit is facilitating greater east-west pedestrian connections across North Capitol Street. But we definitely have taken note of your comment. And again, it's not the only aspect we're considering.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And Kay Tigner, I see you as well with your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. We should be able to hear you now. Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel. I muted you again. Okay, they removed their hand, so we can go back to the Q&A. Is this study looking into closing the Q Street slip lane at the North Capitol and Florida Avenue intersection?
At this phase of the study, we're not looking at that. Ed, would you have anything to add there?
We'll have more to talk about that in the fall meeting, showing the improvements that we'll recommend for Lincoln Road.
Okay. And Kay, I saw your hand came back and went away again. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you. For now, there's more questions in the Q&A. From 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. North Cap from Riggs to Missouri to Hawaii is a racetrack. Can we get enforcement or cameras along this stretch?
We'll note that comment and note the location and work on that internally.
And I believe that we've touched on this question at this point, but the sidewalks in North Cap are inaccessible and likely not ADA compliant. How will your study address making the sidewalks accessible to all users while also not disrupting the tree canopy and heritage trees?
I mean, one of the aims of the project overall is to bring the sidewalks up to DDOT standards. We're still determining the best way to do that and the phasing when that would occur.
Perfect. And then are the costs of maintaining a new public space incorporated into the cost estimate?
For the Deckover?
I believe that is.
We can ask Mike, but I don't think it is. Mike, would you like to respond?
Yeah, that's correct. The costs shown are based on construction estimates and not actually for the maintenance. I also figured I would just jump in quickly. Jeff's question before about the tunnels, if it's been, if they increase capacity, he was actually asking about the existing conditions, which he's clarified in the chat, the existing tunnels. And so the answer to that is kind of, it depends on what you want to compare it to. It does improve intersections or the removing intersections, the vehicles would be traveling through at T Street and Rhode Island Avenue does increase for the north and southbound traffic flow. It does help with those and increase capacity of the roadway. It also helps with the T Street and Rhode Island Avenue cross streets with their efficiency. But this is one of the things that, and I'll actually probably answering a little for Jamie and Ed on this one, so sorry about that. But that one of the things is if we start to look at the boulevard options and all of that, it would be looking at comparing the existing tunnels to what would happen if we do change the roadway.
Thank you, Mike.
Here's another question. Amy and Peyton, let me try to answer for you. That's from Garrett Hennigan. Do you have a sense of where the predominant traffic volumes on North Capitol Street are coming from and going to, or is that coming into phase 1 and 2? We did an initial origin and destination study, and I think Leverson can maybe talk to that just a little bit. Leverson?
Yeah, when we looked at traffic coming out of Maryland area, which is to the north of the study area around Missouri Riggs, if you assume 100 vehicles are coming south, you about 20%, which is about 20 vehicles, will end up coming through Massachusetts Avenue in the south. The majority of the vehicles, maybe about 40 to 50%, get off in the area between Michigan and New York Avenue. And the same thing happens northbound in terms of the origin destination. Of the 100% that originates at Massachusetts in the afternoon, about 40 to 50% get off between New York Avenue and Michigan Avenue. And at the end, only about 20% continue north of the corridor and gets off at Riggs Avenue. So basically, in the morning and in the afternoon, you have about 40 to 50% of all the traffic exchanging between Michigan and New York Avenue.
Thank you, Leverson. Jamie, I can answer another question that I see. It looks like it's from Ben. And that is, can you outline the anticipated path and timing between the phase 2 study completion and finalizing selection of major improvement alternatives? I think, as we said, the phase 1 study will conclude in the fall. We hope, we said spring or summer in 24 will begin the concept engineering and design phase, and that will be 18 to 24 months. So we anticipate that we'll have a major traffic study, modeling, environmental analysis, laying out all the alternatives, going to many community meetings with you, hearing your comments on the alternatives, and that would be about 18 to 24 months after we start the phase 2 effort. I hope that answers your question, Ben.
Great, thank you, Ed. Okay, the next comment / question is regarding traffic issues and traffic laws. So the most important issue for DDOT is enforcement of traffic laws. They point out issues with panhandling across the corridor, as well as people turning left and no left turn areas, and wondering what the study is going to do to address those types of issues.
So Nicole can speak to this, but there are some intersection improvements that we recommended to prohibit the illegal left turns. Nicole, could you speak to that for a little bit? Nicole, are you still on?
Hi, yes, Jamie, I am. And your question was about which intersections?
Just in general, preventing illegal left turns. And I know that's something that we've recommended in some of the short-term safety interventions. So if you could just.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, the intersection that we highlighted directly in my presentation at Riggs Road and Ingraham, we talked about extending the flexible bollards further south to eliminate some of the illegal left turns there. And there are a couple of other locations where we are suggesting more signage to make the message clear to motorists about left turn restrictions. And we have also proposed, I think it's P Street. We have a left turn restriction during the AM peak, and we are proposing one in the southbound direction as well. And we just had the northbound direction. So those are the ones off the top of my head that I can speak to.
Great.
Thank you, Nicole. So that is something we're being considered, and we recognize that as an issue along the corridor.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Jamie. And I see Ben raise his hand, and I know, Ed, you had just addressed one of his questions. So Ben, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you just in case follow-up. Feel free to talk. We should be able to hear you now.
That was it. So it sounds like phase 2, you end with kind of an outline of different options and what it would take to get them done. Does phase 2 end with like the selection of which of those options will be completed, or are there additional steps between completing phase 2 and then deciding what's going to happen?
Generally, at the end of our concept development phase, we will recommend a preferred alternative, and that occurs only after we go through a number of public meetings with you and stakeholder meetings and community advisory committee meetings, et cetera. So, there'll be no decisions until, we come to a point where we have all of the data, all of the traffic analysis, the environmental data that may include noise and vibration impacts of a potential deck over, et cetera. So we'll lay everything out, and hopefully the goal is to recommend a preferred alternative at the end of that phase 2 effort.
Thank you, Ed. I do want to stress to everybody, the meeting is set to end at 8. It is 8 o'clock. I do want to get through a few more questions. I know some individuals have had their hands raised for some time. So I will go ahead and unmute you, Mozella. I know you've been waiting. But if we can keep it kind of short, we should be able to hear you now. Mozella? Okay, I'm not hearing Mozella, so I'm going to lower your hand. If you do want to speak, feel free to raise your hand again. Conrad, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you as well. We should be able to hear you now.
For answering my comments on the chat, just a couple that you didn't get to. They're both regarding the crossings on North Capitol, one at Riggs that you've identified and the other just a block south on Hamilton. So at Riggs, have you considered any lines to guide drivers across from Riggs to Missouri? Because it's a weird intersection, it's a weird angle. I think drivers don't know what to do. So if there were lines not just for people turning on and off of North Capitol, but actually going across North Capitol on that weird intersection, I think it could make things safer. And then on Hamilton, just a block south, there are a lot of students who come from the Fort Totten Metro and they walk to Washington Latin across that intersection every morning, every afternoon. And it just feels super dangerous. We're right at that intersection. We see it every day. We see cars honking. We see a lot of near misses. We've seen some actual accidents. And so anything that could be done to make it safer for students to cross North Capitol at the Hamilton intersection, just, I don't know, extra signage, extra walk markings, whatever it needs to be, something saying that there are students crossing here. There's a lot of kids, and I feel like those kids are at risk.
Can I take a stab? Thank you, Conrad, for your comments. If we could go back, Peyton, please, to about slide 26 at the Riggs Road intersection.
I'm going back right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Oh, yeah, you're controlling it. Thank you, Jamie. And so I want to make sure I'm clear because we do show as a recommendation the lane markings to help with the left turns from North Cap onto Missouri and North Cap onto Riggs. Are you looking for, Conrad, the lane
What I'm
mark?
looking for is going through the intersection straight from east to west, not
Okay.
turning. No
Okay.
turning, just
Thank
going
you.
east to west or west to east.
Thank you. Noted. If there are any, we can certainly add that to our list to evaluate after this meeting. And thank you all as well for your comment about Hamilton.
Thank you.
Okay, and like I had said, I know we're running out of time here. Mozella, I see you raise your hand again. You are unmuted. I can try to unmute you again and let's see if it works.
Hello?
Mozella, I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay,
Great.
hi. I need to know if, one, thank you for getting the information out to my community. Those door knockers really work. But I want to know if there's a way to put in temporary stop signs for Girard and Channing Street, and two, what can be done with all the cars blocking at the box at North Capitol and Rhode Island Avenue? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if we, do you know about putting in temporary stop?
Let's go to Nicole for that.
Yeah, so that corridor, or that segment of the corridor near Girard and Evarts, we've in Douglas, there are no traffic signals there. There's a traffic signal at Michigan and one at Channing, and we've heard from a number of people about the concerns there in terms of speeding and the need for improved pedestrian crossings. There's a bus stop there, and there's no signals there. So we talked about the McMillan project being a long-term solution in terms of adding traffic signals at a couple of the locations there. And depending on the timing of when the McMillan improvements would happen, we're looking at the potential for a second phase of improvements in addition to relocating and new automated speed cameras to address some of the issues. So we are looking at the hybrid signals, for example, as a way of improving pedestrian crossings there. Given the nature of North Capitol Street, I would expect that a stop sign is not an option, but there are the other measures that we're talking about that can certainly be used to address the issues that are important and we've heard tonight.
Thank you, Nicole.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mozella. Ben and Conrad, I noticed that your hands are raised. I don't know if they're just still raised or if that's a new request. I lowered them. If you do have a new comment, please feel free to raise them again. I do want to get us off of here in the next few minutes. I want to just run through a couple of these questions as quickly as I can that are remaining in the chat. So I know one question, Jamie, is about the ADA compliance of sidewalks. Is there anything they can do that can be done to address the concern soon, or do they have to wait for the implementation of this project in 2026 or 2027?
My understanding is I believe we have to wait for the implementation of the project, but I can follow up and see if I can get a different timeline if that's possible.
Okay. And then there was a question about with the 3 deck over options, has there been a look into the noise or sound pollution and vibration coming from each option?
Mike, could you answer that, please?
I can answer it, Jamie.
Thanks, Ed.
Again, this is really very early on in the study. Once we actually lay out those options and look at some concept engineering, we'll look at all of the environmental elements associated with the deck over that's required under NEPA, our environmental regulations. So we will. That will come later. Right now, we're just laying out the concepts, showing you how they might look, and then we'll get into lots more details, including environmental analysis in the coming months.
Thank you, Ed. And while you're here, Ed and Mike, is the study factoring in the need for a park and the desperately need for green space in the area in regards to the deck over, or is it a separate?
One of our Move DC goals is enjoyable spaces, and that's one of a number of goals within our master transportation plan. So again, we'll be looking at the needs of the corridor and trying to evaluate, what the public wants, what you see as the needs and how we're going to accommodate everything. So again, enjoyable spaces is one of the many goals, within our master transportation plan.
And I will also say, at the Irving Street interchange, which we're looking at exploring an urbanized alternative for that in the second phase of the project, the initial concepts that the Office of Planning came up with in their preliminary study also show that urbanizing that interchange and incorporating into the street grid also adds a significant amount of green space.
Great. And then Rebecca, I have a question. I see you acknowledge that you sent one in the chat. I'm not seeing that about additional tunneling. Is there going to be additional tunneling across this project outside of the deck over mentioned, or I'm not sure what the question is, Rebecca. I'm sorry. If you want to raise your hand, we can promote you. But I know it's in regards to additional tunneling. And then are there new traffic cameras being considered at other points on the corridor? Speeding has been a problem everywhere.
Nicole, did we have any of those recommended in our intersection improvements?
No, oh, sorry, just the longer term locations adjacent to the McMillan site is where we know that the developer has signals that they would need to implement.
And just note, we've done some speed studies, and those are included in our existing conditions report, and that is on the website. So we'll be glad to, please feel free to go look at that section of our existing conditions report, and we'll be glad to talk to you further on Saturday about that, or just email us and we'll get back to you.
Okay. Thank you. And I did find Rebecca's question. Is there a possibility to increase the length or amount of tunneling / lower level throughway to both severe traffic and pedestrians better?
That's something
Mike.
we can
Mike, no, let's have Mike answer that question.
I guess, sorry, Peyton, can you reread it again?
Yeah. So is there a possibility to increase the length or the amount of tunneling / lower level throughway to, I guess, the rest of North Capitol Street or other areas on North Capitol Street?
I guess the answer on that is that there's always a possibility, but every increased amount of tunneling we do significantly raises the cost. And so there would have to be a cost benefit comparison on that to try to figure out what is worthwhile as far as increasing the tunneling amount.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And Conrad, I see you're back. I think we just have time for these last two questions with the hand raised. So Conrad, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Super quickly, thank you all very much. This has been an amazing session. And if you can do even half of what you've talked about, I think it's going to make a lot of residents in Washington, D.C. safer. I think it'll also, on the whole, slow down North Capitol, which is not going to make Maryland commuters or long distance, long haul truckers happy. And you may get some external pushback on that. So I just want to A, encourage you and thank you, and B, just make sure that you're psychologically prepared for that external pushback, and I hope that you can stand up to it.
Thank you so much for that, Conrad. And then Gordon, I see you also have your hand raised, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and you should be able to talk now.
Yeah, thanks again for this really great meeting. My question is related to the bridges that set the deck over limits. As part of this project, would a deck over revitalize those bridges? I'm not sure where they are in terms of good, fair, poor condition, but would they include spending money and making sure they're robust?
Mike, could you speak to that?
Sure. And I'm also, just to be clear, I'm not sure of where they are in their life cycle either. That was not part of our feasibility analysis, but what we did include in the feasibility costs would have been basically replacing those two bridges. as part of the overall deck over.
Understood. Thank you.
Jamie, I think we are at 12 minutes after the hour,
Right.
and I think we should conclude our meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. I know it's up on the screen, but I also just wanted to verbally invite you to our in-person meeting this Saturday, the 24th. It's from 10 a.m. to 12 noon at Severna on K. This is an apartment building. It's in their community room. That's at 43 K Street Northwest. It'll be an open house interactive format where we can identify issues on the corridor. We also will have all 10 boards of our intersection improvements. So if you'd like to learn about any more of those in detail and speak with us individually, we'd be happy to do that. There's also more information on our project website about the public meeting, and you can also access the resources that we were speaking about, the existing conditions report and the deck over memo. But we really are looking forward to seeing you on Saturday and really appreciate you taking out the time tonight to be here. So thank you all very much. We appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you all again. Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. And that should conclude tonight's meeting. I think we can go ahead and end it. And I do want to remind everybody that post this meeting closing out, you will be asked to take the Title VI survey, and it would really help us out a lot if you can complete that. I appreciate it and hope to see some of you Saturday.